In this chapter, we're going to delve a little deeper into movie clips and take a look at the new 3D properties that work with Flash Player 10. Of course, along the way, we'll have a few animation tips and techniques, but the big new topic will be the movie clips themselves and what you can do with them. As you can see for this chapter, I've already got the football FLA file open, and you should find yours in the Chapter 5 folder of our project files on your desktop. Once you've opened it up, you can see that we're going to be working on football. We've got a field. We've got some goalposts, and we've got a football that we can work with. So let's get things started by taking a look at the elements that we've got on our stage. First of all, the field is a movie clip. And so are the other items as well. And with movie clips, we're able to work with all of the different properties that we see down here. One of those new properties is our 3D position and view. And we've also got a couple of new tools in our tool palette specifically for these 3D properties. So I'd like to try those out first. Let's make sure we have our field selected. And what I'd like to do is take that field from a flat view into something a little bit more dynamic that goes into the scene. If we back up just a little bit on the zoom, we can see that we have a whole flat field here to work with. Now we're all pretty used to moving around objects in 2D space just with our normal selection tool. So let's go and try our 3D selection and move tool. Both our tools are located here, and you can see one of them is rotation and one of them is translation or moving an object. So let's select the translation tool first. Now right off the bat, this tool is a little bit different. You can see that it drops a set of arrows onto the object, and we actually move our object by grabbing one of the arrows and moving along the arrow axis. So we're not going to do normal selection. We're going to grab the arrows, and I can move up and down with the green one. There's actually 3 arrows there, but the other one is a blue one right in the center, and you could think of it as pointing directly at you. This is the real 3D part. If I click and drag down, you can see that I'm actually pulling the object in space closer to me. And if you push up, you're doing the opposite. You're moving the object further away. Now, that's not too exciting right off the bat because we could always just take our object with the free transform tool and make it smaller. What's nice is when we set a 3D position that actually includes a Z property, the program automatically calculates how much smaller the object should appear, so we're getting an actual 3D view. Now, things get even better when we switch over to the rotation tool. I'm going to go back up to my tool set. We'll click on the 3D rotation tool, and you can see we're getting some kind of graphic in the middle here. Now, this is actually very specialized, just like the arrows for the translational tool. First of all, each one of the axes is an axis that we're now going to rotate around. Now, if I place my cursor on the red axis, which is actually representing the X direction, I can actually twist my object by pulling a little bit to each side. If you pay close attention, the actual circle here becomes kind of like a little clock, and as you pull on the red, you can see that you're actually twisting around the axis. So you can get a feel for how much you've moved the object in this 3D space. Likewise, if I grab the green line, I can twist the axis in a Y direction. Now, as you can see, we can get some pretty complex rotations out of this tool. The blue axis is simply the flat space of the page itself, and that just allows me to twist it around. And there's actually one more line on here. The orange line, if you click your cursor on that, it's actually a free-for-all kind of a tool. You can move in all directions depending on how you move your cursor. Now, be careful with this one because you might set up something that you don't quite like. If it gets too out of hand, you can always go back up to the Modify menu, go down to Transform, and you can simply remove the transform and it'll reset your graphic right back to the way it was when you started. I do recommend using these central axes at least when you're getting started, at least until you get the hang of working in 3D, just because it's a lot easier to control the elements. Now I'm going to push this back a little bit along the X direction. I'll swing it around the Y axis so that we get kind of a nice view, and I'm really looking for something where the field looks a little bit flat. Now, there I've got kind of a long perspective view, but I can switch right back to my 3D translation tool. And again, if I pull out, I'm kind of getting a nice closer view of that object. We can move it into position until we get exactly the kind of 3D view that we're looking for. Now, as you can see here, I've almost got it so that it looks like we're looking down the field. And what we can do is move our goalposts around and maybe rescale them a little bit so that they look like they're sitting right at the end of the field. I'm going to switch over to my free transform tool. I'll hold the shift button down so I get a uniform scale, and I'll just make this goalpost a little bit smaller. And then I can move it so it's positioned right in the end zone there. Let me switch back to my normal view tool, and we'll click away. And let me zoom in just a little bit, and we'll see if we've got our scene set up properly. We can see that the 3D tools do a much more convincing job of creating perspective. In fact, it looks like my goalpost is a little bit tweaked right now. Now, this is just a normal 2D object, but now that I see the lines, I can just double-click to edit it. And you can see that the goalpost upper point is just a group inside there. So I'm going to double-click to go inside that group. I think I have to click away first, select it by itself, double-click, and then I can edit these lines just like we would a normal vector line. Now you can see that my selection just has the upright portion of the goalposts, but if I click away, you'll see that I can edit the vector, and I can straighten out the line a little bit to actually match the perspective lines that we have in our view. That looks a lot better. I'm going to go back to the scene 1 just by going and clicking on scene 1 directly, and we'll click away. And that looks like a much better view of our end zone so that the football can sail through the posts.